Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion on Stand for Pride that focuses on LGBTQ plus inclusion. I'm Navita, cis woman, going by the pronouns she and her. I head client engagement at Silver Oak Health, and I will be moderating today's session. So the relevance of today's topic is Pride Month is celebrated each year in the month of June to increase awareness on dignity, equal rights of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer folks. So this month, it is also important to take a positive stance against discrimination and violence against the LGBTQ plus folks. I'm pleased to announce our speakers for today. We have June, who identifies as a queer feminist lesbian. Her pronouns are she and her. She's based out of Calcutta and currently she works with Solidarity Foundation. June focuses on feminist rethinking of minority rights, LGBTQI plus advocacy and activism. She's also a teacher at heart, cat enthusiast, and a homebody. Welcome, June. Very pleased to have you here. We also have Melvin Lobo, who is a cis man going by the pronouns he, him, his. He has been working for an MNC for 15 years as HR talent manager. He has been leading the Pride program and driving several interventions and programs to accelerate the culture of equality and create an inclusive workplace for all. He's also a mental wellness and equal rights advocate. He's a trained yoga instructor and a mindful meditation practitioner. Welcome, Melvin. Pleased to have you.
I'm glad to be
And
here.
thank you. Last but not least, we have Pooja Nair, cis woman going by the pronouns she and her. Has been part of the nonprofit sector for over a decade. She has worked as a researcher, documentation consultant, trainer, and now as an independent therapist. She has an MPhil from Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has worked in the areas of life skills, feminist theory, gender, sexuality, violence, and child sexual abuse. She's also a faculty at Mariwala Health Initiative's Queer Affirmative Counseling Practice Certification course. Welcome, Pooja. Pleased to have you here. And to begin today's discussion, Pooja, I would like to invite you first. Can you tell us when and how did you start your journey towards LGBTQ plus inclusion?
Well, I think my work for LGBTQ inclusion started because of wanting to feel, included myself, finding myself outside of, this sort of normative mainstream space, and then wanting to figure out where I belong. And then also finding myself in the mental health space, which has historically tried to cure people like me. So I actually sort of owe professional allegiance to a field that is notorious for various kinds of, atrocities against queer people. And sort of then figuring out what that means, and that's the direction that my work has also taken in trying to what we have been saying is queer mental health, queer the verb, and to try to understand, in what ways does mental health, the mental health establishment need to change? In what ways does mental health practice need to change? Because we would like it to be informed by the margins. We would like it to be informed by the very lives that it has deemed abnormal or to be cured. So to then inform mental health practice from the margins has then become the focus of my work. And of course, then I sort of straddle personal, professional, and political locations all at once in my work. So in brief, yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much for sharing. June, if you were to tell me about your journey.
Hi, everyone. Hi, happy Pride Month to all of you. And thank you for having me here, Navita. As Navita shared my very kind introduction, I currently work with Solidarity Foundation. A little about my journey so far. I was born and raised in Kolkata and I studied comparative literature. And I started my work life in the corporate space. I was working with Amazon as a learning and development specialist, and I quit my job in 2015, and in 2016 is when I started working with the LGBT community. And I have been working since then on different projects at multiple capacities, sometimes on the ground, sometimes from the desk. And my job primarily revolves around reimagining inclusion for queer people, and especially Indian queer identities, and to see how can we cover the bridge between the quote unquote Western understanding of queer inclusion and make it more Indian. How can we customize inclusion to the Indian culture? That remains as the core focus of my work as of now.
That's amazing, Joan. Thank you so much. Melvin, over to you. If you were to give us a brief of your journey.
Yes, I think first of all, wishing you all a happy Pride Month. And thank you, Navita, for having me here. Firstly, it's a great and interesting to be part of such a conversation where we are talking about LGBTIQ community. And with respect to about my journey, I think I came out very late in life. I would say late because it was in my late 20s. Until then, I was this aggressive person with pent-up frustration and not knowing why I'm like this, and always thought, one day this would all vanish. One day I would wake up and will not have to deal with any of this bullying, stress, or fear that I was living with. And I remember the one day I attended this informal dinner, which was with the community members at workplace, without knowing what was it for. And I just went and I found people like me, and it was exhilarating. And from there, it was never turning back. And that has been the anchor point to my self-acceptance. And since then, I've also been leading the Pride program at my workplace, and it has been like for over 3 years now. And I remember at two different intervals, two employees who reached out to me after one of couple of sessions that I've been doing. They reached out to me and they came out to me about their sexual orientation. And I think, through this journey, I feel proud that I'm able to make someone else comfortable and they are able to open up about themselves. And that is what exactly LGBT community needs, to be able to express themselves and to be able to, they're accepted for who they are. So I think that's what I would, sum it up.
Thank you, Melvin. I think you pointed out a very critical point in terms of, being accepted for who we are, right? And we also see a lot of misconceptions and, prejudices that play a role in the society and at workplaces. Pooja, if you can share in terms of what are these barriers that we see which, hinder LGBTQ plus inclusion in society?
So I think I'd like to sort of shape my answer a little differently. One way to do this would be to list out barriers, because obviously there are many. And at various levels, beginning from within you to every other person then you're connected to, every other institution that you're connected to. So there's, again, the listing of the barriers or the experience of it. But I think a more fundamental question here is, that when we say prejudice, misconceptions, where are these coming from? And I think that understanding, if you use, you will then, then you can't unsee the kind of discrimination that exists, because fundamentally the conceptualizing of certain, or the belief that certain sexualities are normal and there are some that aren't normal. So this normal and abnormal classification is what makes for a lot of the distress. So, we can ask those follow-ups, what do you mean normal, and why is certain sexuality abnormal? And there are, there's enough and more that the community has constantly been saying about how only reproductive, sort of within marriage sexuality is seen as normal and everything else. And once you start unpacking, it's rather arbitrary and, just to do with the social, not so much to do with the medical or the legal or nothing. There's just the social so deeply embedded in what is normal and what is abnormal, to the point that we don't even say that heterosexuality is a sexuality. If we were to start talking about sexuality, I don't foresee anyone mentioning heterosexuality as a sexuality or mentioning cisgender as a gender. It is always going to be from the other. We have to start a conversation only by putting the lens on the LGBTQ and let us study the oppression and all of that. And we just completely ignore the oppressor or where the trouble stems from. So, you know, I think that that's sort of a hierarchical classification of heterosexuality and then the other sexualities being abnormal. All of these are a source, and which, I mean, once you deem something abnormal, you're also going to call it illegal. It could also be labeled immoral. It could be sinful. Then you have to find various ways to ensure that it remains outside of what we understand is normal. And then all the institutions just sort of, you know, get together, and which means that then you're experiencing discrimination and barrier at each of these levels. You experience it with family, then with religion, with community, with workplace, you know, with the legal institutions, with the state, at every point, because you have been labeled the other, that which is illegal, immoral, abnormal, and sinful. So, yeah. I think again.
Yeah, I think thank you, Pooja. I think we do hear these right from, you know, childhood. So I think that's something that plays around, you know, and this is what we keep hearing in terms of normal and who defines normal. Absolutely. I think thank you for bringing up that point. Melvin, if we were to talk about the barriers in terms of, you know, at workplaces, what are some of these that we see, whether it's, you know, the environment, what have you seen largely?
I think, you know, just to add on to what Pooja also said, right? We never question heteronormative sexual construct, right? And also the discrimination comes from there because it is given. No one questions it, right? And something that we don't see from there is something becomes discrimination, and it's start getting questioning. And I think that is where we need to understand. And at a workplace, it's quite possible that this happens at much larger scale. I think the biggest barrier, I would say, and one of the foremost barrier on one faces at workplace is not able to come out, because again, going by what Pooja said, we are in a heteronormative construct. So I think, we fail to understand how, why it is so much important to come out, and being out matters. Because imagine 24 hours of work, we easily spend 10 to 12 hours interacting with our colleagues and our team members on a work-to-work basis. And imagine constantly you have to lie about yourself, about your identity. How it can take a toll on your mental health. It can take a toll on your social conditioning. We fail to understand, and unable to come out really, contributes to lower workplace productivity because it is stressful and debilitating to that person. I remember in one of the conversations, one of the senior leaders happened to mention very casually. Of course, they wanted to implement some of the policies. They're like, I don't think we have gay, lesbian people at our workplace. And that is what we have to move away from, the thought process and assumption that you'll be able to see the community in its light, in its full glory, if you're able to create that conducive environment for employees to be able to be their authentic selves. Another instance I just remember, and I just want to give that instance because I remember after closing one of this Pride session, I got a ping from this girl, and she said, I like the session, and I want to tell you that I'm lesbian. I said, and I think over the chat, I was just trying to have more conversation with her because I did not want to abruptly close the conversation. I said, and we went ahead with the conversation, and I asked her, are you out at the workplace? And she said, no. And again, my follow-up question was, is there a reason why, that you are not out? And she told me this interesting thing. She said that once there was a casual debate on same-sex marriage, and all the team members were against it. Imagine the impact that the person has who wants to come out to his team members or colleagues will not be able to come out. And that is what I think is the biggest barrier. Other than the workplace, infrastructure, policies, processes, if I talk about transgender community, the barriers they face, 98% of the transgender people are abandoned by their own family members. And as organization, we would expect them to have a certain level of graduation or post-graduation. How they're able to even get it if they're not have completed their education? As a society, we never uplifted them. And now everyone would want to hire them. We want these many transgenders to be hired in the organization. But are we adjusting or accommodating to hire them? Are we creating a conducive environment for them? To look at the infrastructure right now, maybe are we in the COVID environment, but once we go back at a workplace, do we have unisex washroom for transgender? Does our recruitment documents, all our process documents, does it mention third gender? which has been, the third gender has been legally recognized by the government. Even our policies are so gender based, right? Can we make it gender neutral, be it a maternity leave or a paternity leave or a caregiver leave or a life insurance or a medical insurance that I would like to give it to my partner? Because it is again gender based. It is either a wife or a husband or a children. I think these are some of the basic barriers that we need to move away with to make an inclusive environment for workplace, I feel. And I think and just one last thing, before I forget to my point of is I remember, a lot of time there are policies on sexual harassment. We need to include bullying or harassment on sexual orientation also. And I think that should be a zero tolerance policy. And that is some of the things that we can do to remove the barrier as well. So I think, that's my point of view.
Thanks, Melvin. Even when you're talking about, harassment. So what happens? Do I even have that safe space that if I'm harassed, I've not come out, but how will I, file a complaint? So most times, yeah, please go ahead. I think you want to add something.
Yeah, no, you are right, right? Like if I do not have as an employee or as a person as a part of the organization, I don't know where to go and address my concern. If the policy doesn't mention it, it is like a document, right? Like, because that is guided for the whole of organization, and that needs to be very, very crystal clear. That means it protects the people of the LGBTIQ community as well. And that is a bigger step. And that also shows how leadership is invested and interested in protecting the LGBTIQ community as well. And there's no discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. I think that's the point.
Thank you, Melvin. June, if I were to ask you, because you've worked with many corporates, you have been working to create, awareness on all of these, but what are some of those biases that we see? We're talking about, the environment, even infrastructure, having, gender neutral washrooms. But when it comes to biases in people, especially in the context of, my career is dependent, on a person's, probably my manager's notion or perceptions about me. So that can hinder, right? So what are some of the biases that probably you can throw light?
Sure. So, let me share a little bit about my own experience at the workplace. This is back in 2015. So LGBT inclusion wasn't in the mainstream conversation, so as to speak. So I got, and that was also when I had recently come out. It had been a couple of years that I had come out, but not for everybody. I didn't want to come out at work because I didn't have the resources. And again, 6-7 years ago, even the internet wasn't as endowed as it is right now. So I got outed because somebody found out about my orientation, which was completely without my knowledge, and I got outed at workplace. And I always had a people-facing job role because I work in L&D, I work in learning and development. So it was quite a traumatic experience for me. Now, again, to say that 7 years ago, things weren't as strong as they are today in terms of zero tolerance policy. However, I could take the issue to the HR. I did file a complaint and I did receive an apology. What did not happen, and to tie into what Melvin was just sharing, and I am still dealing with the same problem 7 years later in my workspace today. What did not happen is sensitization of the employees, because just protecting me in a in a zero tolerance policy is not enough, because that is it's very similar to having a constitution but actually living in a democratic way. And to live in a democratic way, we need to be educated. So some of the biases, to connect back to what I faced back then, being outed. Now, many companies, many organizations understand that outing is very, very detrimental for the person. However, what are the steps you take if something like this happens? What would you do if I was outed today against my consent? Some other biases that, again, very quickly I can point out, and all of these are so easily easy to fix through just a basic sensitization is misgendering. I'm not even talking about deliberate misgendering. I am talking about just making a faux pas. Now, if I tell you that my pronouns are she and her, but I don't look to you like a she and her, it is very common that you'll keep making that mistake over and over and over again. Now, even if you apologize after making the mistake and you correct yourself, that's one thing. As a community, there is some space for accepting people missing out on certain things, but apologize and then use the correct pronoun. That's all it takes, right? So such a small way to create biases. Or when you're conversing about your family or your personal life that is outside of work, all the conversations are so heteronormative, where you are discussing marriage or in-laws or children or pre-marriage matrimonial conversations and dating, heteronormative dating patterns. I mean, of course, these are very important conversations too, but I would not feel that like I have anything to contribute here, And since I am probably the only queer person in a group of 20, all I do is I would sit quietly. So that is, again, is it bias? I wouldn't say it's a bias, but these are things one needs to be made aware of consciously.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of I kind of agree, because so heteronormative. I remember once joining the call with the senior leader, and of course we have to do some small talk and conversation right before everyone
Right.
joins in, and that was very typical. And in the conversation she asked me, "Oh, do you stay with your children?" And I'm like, "I'm not even married," and I'm like, the constant struggle to explain and to keep on coming out, it's a daunting task, because we're so conditioned to be heteronormative, right? Like we always, even if it's a guy, will be always like, the immediate question would be, do you have a girlfriend? If it's a girl,
Yes.
immediate question, do you have a boyfriend? Or, what about your husband? Why aren't you getting married? And I mean, why it is so important? I mean, we are not able to understand that, and people have certain choices with which they would want to live with. I think we need to respect that.
Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree, June and Melvin, because and you also spoke about, the authentic self, right? So ideally, at conversations like this, you are not your authentic self, and that can
Exactly.
be a really big struggle. And
Yeah.
most times, yeah. Sorry,
No,
you
I
were saying,
remember, I
Melvin?
remember before I came out to my own self, and I remember every weekend, post coming weekend on a Monday morning, my colleagues or my friends at office would ask, what you did. I could never tell them that if I went out with my then boyfriend or with my gay friends, I could never tell them what I was doing in my actual life. It's so easy for a hetero to go and tell that, oh, I went out with my friends, I went out with my girlfriend, I went out with my boyfriend, I played with my kids, I went for a movie with my family. It's so naturally for them to express it. Imagine
Yeah.
I'm not even able to say that. And I remember this very, very vividly. I kept on lying to them every now and then, because I did not want to show that part of my life. And now coming to think of it, I find it so stupid that I have to hide a big part of my life from my own friends who were so close to me. So it takes a toll on a lot of fronts, which we don't understand, and these are the nuances. When I look back, I find, of course I laugh at it now, but I wish I could have done that earlier. Like I said, I came out late in my life. I wish I could do that, and everyone would want to live that life. You want to talk about your crushes to your friends, like how they are expressing it, and we are not able to express the same way, and we feel that, oh, we are different, and we have to suppress our feelings. So that is something, is it's a small thing, but I'm sure for that person it's a very big thing.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to, suppressing some of these emotions that we go through, it can impact our mental health, right? And especially living with the fear every day I'm coming to work and I have to, and if I were to come out and if there are negative consequences, like I'm going to lose my job or probably I might not get that promotion, which is a constant worry. So, Pooja, can you also highlight in terms of the impact on the mental health? And can you share from, of course, being, from your background, can you share being a psychologist and, in the queer affirmative as a co-affirmative practitioner as well?
So I'll just start with with one of my clients. We were working a little bit on how to manage experiences of homophobia, discrimination at the workplace. And my client was sharing that there is a lot of that this person was afraid that if they try to make a presentation and gesticulate a lot, and this person is an assigned man, identifies gay, and assigned male, cisgender, gay person. And if he were to sort of present and then use a lot of gestures, there is a chance that he will be marked as gay. And then what would that lead to? And that had meant that over time, this person was censoring himself, wasn't talking or presenting much, not because he didn't have good ideas, not because of capacity or capabilities, but just think about how then the circumstances and the surroundings do not give a queer person the opportunities to realize these capacities. There wasn't any environment. And I also I just remember what I've read once. I heard this at some point, that, visibility without protection is a trap. So as much as we want to talk visibility and that there should be, visible queer people, to just understand that a lot of the censoring is an act of safety, is an act of self-preservation. Yeah, as much as, it is wrong that we have to do that, but we have to do that in order to sort of feel safe, in order for our livelihoods to be maintained. So I think any sort of conversation about workplace also would have to constantly know, where do you pin the responsibility? It is not the queer person's fault that they are not coming out. What are the protections that are offered? What is the kind of safety that is offered? Because trust me, every queer person knows this. Every act of coming out is a risk. You never know who you stand to lose when you are coming out to someone. It is an absolute, risk. Sometimes it pays off, and most often we lose family, friends, colleagues, jobs, other kinds of material losses, and also it is definitely a risk. So on whom does the onus lie then? And when we are talking mental health costs or mental health challenges, where do these mental health challenges arise? If I have to censor myself, if I have to be hyper vigilant, what does that say about where I am? That I am being scrutinized. And if this wasn't if this conversation wasn't being a very queer affirmative, perhaps someone would have sent my client for public speaking classes. Why don't you go and work on your communication skills and figure out how to do speeches and be more confident and just do it, and all the Hallmark card type slogans and all. But what about the very real risks that he might have to experience in that coming out? So I think so then it means that this person is living an everyday of, again, fear, is living an everyday of hypervigilance, would have to keep censoring. I mean, the level to which one might have to censor, we don't understand, because we don't understand how just all pervasive heterosexuality and heteronormativity is. Because I was once attending, I remember this story because June and Melvin are also sharing stories, that I was in a dance class, a workshop. It was a brief sort of a Zoom workshop done online these days. And towards the end, everyone was just doing some casual chit chat. And one of the women just casually says, oh, well, my back's hurting. My husband will do a massage later tonight. Do we see that as heterosexuality being played out in front of us? Otherwise there is so much of this, don't be gay here and don't be gay there and don't keep your gay at home. But look at how heterosexuality is everywhere. I see heterosexuality when I see a Mangal Sutra. I see heterosexuality when I see a pregnancy. I see heterosexuality when a man and a woman are walking together. So there is, it's all pervasive. And that is what we need to keep questioning and to keep talking about how, if heterosexuality is so pervasive, who should start talking about making space inclusive? who has to now figure out how to transform spaces that are open and accepting and non-discriminatory for queer people? It is not my conversation to have, because I am at the receiving end of it. I am trying to live my life and struggle through all of this and trying to figure it out, try to work towards my safety, my self-preservation, because nobody else is invested in it. No other institution is telling me, come Pooja, we'll help you survive this world. I'm on my own in that sense, because of my gender sexuality, not because of my scorecard, not because of any other sort of ways of measuring human worth, etc. Just purely based on identity. So I think that I just wanted to sort of lay that out, and a little bit of the mental health consequence would be to also say then say that fundamentally, when Melvin also used the word difference, right? Fundamentally, when we know somewhere or that we experience that we are different, queer people internalize this as bad difference. That we are not different in roses and lilies, but that we are different as roses and I don't know,
thorns,
gunk on the fans or cobwebs or thorns. Yeah. So I mean, in diversity, when you experience self as not as valid, as being different in a bad way, perhaps in a dirty way, perhaps in a way that is not welcome. So then how do you live with that difference? Because what has that done to your sense of self? And then what are the conversations about mental health we can have when that sense of self is constantly, the society is going at it with a picket axe? So, I mean, when we say mental health, we have to look at what it does to your sense of self, your sense of safety, your dreams for the future, your dreams for yourself, all of that. I mean, and therefore the mental health conversation is much larger and the impact very, very wide. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Pooja. I think I'll come back to you on, of course, in terms of how can we have these conversations. You brought out a very valid point in terms of what we see is the conditioning that we're used to, and how can we change those at a very early stage as well. But Jude, if I were to ask you, because you have been working with, of course, sexual minorities, how can workplaces become inclusive? And of course, I'll go back to Pooja on at home and educational systems and all of that. But can you tell me some of the probably good work that you've seen and the progressive work that organizations are taking steps towards? So yeah.
Yeah. So this can be done in alignment with your intent as a company. So if I could just break this down a little further, first things first, there is no census in India for the community. The last census was taken in 2011, and that was more than 10 times less than what non-governmental census expects the LGBTQ plus population to be in India. So that automatically invisibilizes a lot of people. Now, when as an organization, I am looking at being queer inclusive, the first thing that companies look at is hiring. And you set out to hire a queer person, almost like a targeted, like a key responsibility, right? Fair enough. If you have a place to fill with a certain identity, now you need to understand what demographic am I looking at hiring. So 1% of the queer population maximum would come with the requirements like a higher degree, like at least a graduation, speaking English and basic computer literacy, right? Fluency, computer fluency. These are the three things that you will require. In India, I could say between 25 to 30% of people have two of the three criteria and they get through some sort of a entry-level job. But because of the LGBT community massively, and I work mostly with the working class community members as well, so they are massively excluded from the education system. Going back to early age bullying from teachers and students, they, even if it is not an expensive school or college, they drop out because they can't keep up for 13-15 years in the education system with the kind of bullying they go through. They do not have access to learn English as a life skill or computer as a life skill. So now as a company, if you understand that, okay, I need to access this 30% of the talent pool, we need to have a conversation on equity. So I'm not even, Navita, addressing how to be inclusive at this point. I am saying we need to take 2 steps back and look at equity. As an organization, am I willing to bridge these gaps with on-job trainings? Because these are life skills that can be picked up by adults very quickly. 6 months is enough for someone to learn Excel and properly learn Excel, So that is the first thing we need to do. If you want to talk about inclusivity, you need to be able to hire people. You need to be able to take in people who are, we call it the glass door. They are standing on the other side of this glass door. That 1% of privileged queer person like me who can walk in and get a job at an Amazon is, and is out and, living my identity out and proud and loud enough to be the face of the company. These are very rare people. Just because the society doesn't let, I managed that because of my surmounting privilege. I had supportive family and friends and what one could have asked for to cover this journey. So let's start there. And of course, the very other thing that you need to immediately do is make your recruitment onwards every step inclusive. Very simply, your forms. If I walk in to apply for a job and I don't have a place to choose my own title, that is not a nice feeling. Posh, like Melvin was saying, I just want to share this really good example of, we are currently working with Big Basket where we are placing people, and I currently worked with them on their Posh policy where we made the gender of the perpetrator and the survivor gender neutral. So that's all it takes. It's just one additional line that the gender of perpetrator and survivor should be neutral. That's all it takes to be inclusive. So these basic protection steps would be your second step, and your step 0 is to hire more inclusively and look at on-job upskilling of more community members.
Thank you, June. And adding to what you were saying as well in terms of upskilling, and I have heard, when there are so many even conferences that happen on D&I and, having at the workplace, the representation focusing on underrepresented groups. Many times we receive this question in terms of, due to lack of awareness, right, statements like, where do I find these people?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's very alarming to hear. And again, Pooja, if I were to ask you, because your organization played a very instrumental role in the recent ban on conversion therapy, right? And of course, the judge also said that education systems need to change. We need to talk about creating awareness. And that's the even first start to having normal conversations about accepting everyone, right? So can you share in terms of at home, at, even schools, colleges, how can we raise awareness? Because most times some also fear conversations, or some don't want to, wholeheartedly participate. So when we see these, behaviors, how can we, proactively, even as allies, how can we raise more awareness?
So I think thanks for that. It's a very important question, because we also need to have some sense of what now, or where do we go from here. So I think that's an important question. And yes, regarding the Madras High Court judgment, I think that was an extremely interesting one, because the judge wanted to hear from practitioners, from a mental health practitioner, and to understand challenges of the community. And the court appointed mental health practitioner Vidya Dinakaran was someone who has trained with us at QACP. So she and her colleague Shanmati, both of them had trained at the Queer Affirmative Counseling Practice course that we run. And they were also able to use a lot of the learnings from the curriculum in order to inform the judge. So there was content that could be shared, and there was also someone who was willing to listen. So I think the key is that, you know, how do we talk about listening and learning from the margins? How do we take that listening stance? And I mean, it's easier said than done, because even prior to that listening, we are dealing with things like shame or disgust or fear. Yeah. I think conversations about how to make space, how to have discussions. Show I think Mr. Woods for the trees, or there is some probe like the forest for the trees or something like that, because we get too caught up in the technicalities. We're wondering which words to use. Is it okay to say lesbian in front of someone? Is it okay to say trans in front of the kids? You know, is it okay for them to see two gay men together? Well, they're old enough. You take them to weddings everywhere, no? If they're old enough to attend weddings and see that couplehood, how about a diversity of couplehoods? You know, you might actually end up creating a world which is far more safe and equitable. I think a very fundamental work that all of us have to do is to work through shame. And here I feel we're coming full circle, because we started the conversation talking about how it's Pride Month. And Pride Month is a celebration not of, well, look at me, but a celebration of how I have worked through my shame that the society tried to heap on me. Because I was in all our, you know, queer people and trans people, we engage with the shame that our identity brings. And we celebrate Pride because of all the work we have to unfairly put into working through that shame, and then to feel and to sort of claim this space of pride, because otherwise there is no other process that facilitates pride. So I think in terms of even sexuality, shame is such a huge mechanism of control. You know, you don't even need laws. Shame is enough. Even in terms of marriages and all, even if there are laws that facilitate intercaste marriages and all, social shame and stigma is enough to stop those marriages from happening. It doesn't matter that there are laws which will facilitate it. So shame is such a powerful regulatory tool in our minds. I mean, if we don't start working through our own shame about anything that doesn't conform or fit our ideas of normal, if we don't work through our discomfort, we will not listen. And if we do not listen, we cannot talk. Because as the saying goes, for everything else, there's Google. You know, so I don't think this is a data or a knowledge deficit in terms of conversations. Yeah.
Very true, because of course, even the judge, right, he was not really aware, or the, you know, what he has been aware of, he wanted to, you know, abreast himself with what is or got the psychoeducation, and that is the first step before, especially when you are talking about power at workplaces, at every aspect. People with power, with, you know, the preconceived notions, can really, you know, cause such a huge impact on the other person's life, and that's the importance nobody will understand. And I can also see a statement here saying that sometimes people exist in workplaces silently because of fear of not being understood, or being made fun of, or, you know, being cornered. So
absolutely. I just wanted to add on that the court thing is that MHI is bringing out a report of the process and the ways in which these conversations happened with the judge, and, you know, what all went into that journey. So again, to mark the Pride Month on June 30th, that report will be released and will be available on MHI social media spaces if anyone wants to inform themselves. Yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. But also this brings up, you know, important aspect on allies, right? How important are allies to the community? Also, I see a lot of organizations have employee resource groups working towards multiple areas on underrepresented groups. So, Melvin, if you can share, one is the importance of allies, and also at workplaces, do ERGs even work, and how can we make them work?
I think I'll take a point from what Pooja said, right? It is the heteros who have to take this forward, because they are the one who are not discriminated, and they have to be the strong supporter of the LGBT community. And that is the importance of being an ally. And don't be a passive ally because your organization is telling you that, you know, you have to sign up, you have to support. Your solidarity towards the community should come in real, in reality as well. Because firstly, we have to understand who's an ally. An ally is someone who takes action to promote the LGBTI community regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And for that, you have to be informed, educate yourself, be visible, be vocal. I think that is where the allies play a very, very important role. I also see a question in the chat window, right? How can we be of help, or how can we support the LGBTI community other than knowing your basic your basic thing of an ally? It starts with you need to, if you see something going wrong, you need to say something. You need to stand up. You need to speak up. If there's a homophobic joke happening by anyone in the group, will you be able to stand up and say that I feel this is wrong? Imagine the kind of an environment that you're creating, and if from that group is even if one person is part of the LGBTIQ community, will feel so much safe and secured to be able to come out to that ally. I think that is the basic importance of ally. It's not a number game. It is about whether I have people who will show solidarity, who will understand this topic, because a lot of people do not understand what it means to be LGBTIQ community. Because what do I don't care about something that I don't know and I don't want to know about it. But do you have, and as an ally, are you able to take that interest? Are you ready to uncover some of your unconscious bias? Are you ready to initiate conversations with your LGBTIQ co-workers? Are you ready to include them? So I think that dialogue, and I think that is the importance of ally, because those are the ones who can become a strong supporters and make that work environment inclusive. I think that is where allies play a very, very important role. And I think as organization, we need to use that in a very structured manner, because sometimes it just, and I say that from experience as well, because sometimes the allies are there, but how you're going to leverage them, how you're going to use them is also very, very essential. And how you educate them, how you make them actively involved in the pride programs, what they clearly calling it out, what is their role as well. It could be simple as standing up for your LGBTIQ co-workers. I think that is the basic essential, and I think that is very, very essential for corporates to really look at workplace, how we can leverage allies.
Thank you, Melvin. And the important aspect of inclusiveness, even in our daily interactions, right? That plays such a important role, because most times the jokes, the comments that are made, you need to stand up for them. And I think that's also the first step that we can take. I think we can take up some questions from the audience. So there is a question on how can an organization encourage its employees to be open to express their sexuality if needed? While holding sessions on awareness is only a basic part of the education, what more can be done?
I would like to think that. Yeah. So firstly, I would like to say that there should not be any expectation from the company on employees to come out. Coming out is a completely personal journey. And if it looks like I am running an LGBT inclusive company with 0 LGBT employees, that means you are not inclusive enough yet. The moment you are inclusive enough, 1 or 2 people will slowly start coming out. So it's a self-testing method. If no one is coming out, you're not inclusive enough yet, because it's not possible that there wouldn't be one queer person in 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people in some situations, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is, while sensitizing and education can seem like a very basic thing to do, what more can we tangibly possibly do faster? I will again, lean back on the importance of sensitization. I would urge to look at sensitization as your stepping stone, because how would you, make conscious decisions as a well-meaning adult of what is okay and what is not okay, unless you receive that the initial level of education on something that you have been systematically kept away from knowing about. Right? So the first and the most important step has to be sensitization. Only then, as an organization or even as an individual for that matter, can I even think about being an ally? So there are multiple organizations like ours, like Solidarity Foundation. There are many other organizations who take, good care of your employees in terms of answering their questions, having a very open discussion on, helping them realize whatever doubts that they might have. So please invest in such sensitization. I'm so sorry about my cat. Please invest in such sensitization programs. That is, I cannot, stress on the importance of that enough.
Yeah. I think also, I think June, what she mentioned, I think while the question I know says that, beyond sensitization or beyond awareness, what one can do. But I think that is the basic requirement at this point in time, because a lot of people do not even understand, they are not able to reflect on their own, some of the underlying beliefs or the unconscious bias that they have. Probably a lot of people would not have the context in which the LGBTI community functions in India.
Yeah.
That is very basic and important. What are the challenges an LGBT member faces? We don't know. Are we able to articulate? We are saying about inclusive policy. Is the leadership at the top able to articulate the LGBT inclusion at workplace very, very clearly to the employees? Because it means a lot if someone is able to articulate that. I think these are some of the things that are very, very essential. One last question. A lot of time we expect a lot of things from the organization. I think this has to be a basic premise at your own individual level. And one question you need to always ask yourself: if any of your family members, your children, or your relative, or your partner comes out to you as gay, bisexual, transgender, will you accept the person or not? Forget about all the learning that we are having at this point in time. And you need to understand that you can hate the idea, but how can you hate the person? If that is very, very clear, I think as individuals, we are on the right track and on the right path. I think that is the basic of it. And I think all learning and understanding can come after that.
Yeah, I think creating that safe environment is probably even the first step. Yeah. And that leads to, a couple of questions. And I think, Pooja, you can also take this up, because it's talking about how can I cope, or what is the coping mechanism for a queer person who's a victim of homophobia at workplace, or even, coming from a conservative family.
I think when it comes to marginalization, what we know is that multiple support systems are needed. There is no sort of instant, unfortunately, there isn't a very quick and easy way to respond. It means that certain support systems are needed, and then one hopes that these support systems are available. So when I say that perhaps therapy might help, I'm also wondering, are there affirmative therapists out there, or will that person also try to then stigmatize you or individualize you? So I think, and which is why a lot of times historically we have only, the queer community has only depended on itself, on each other. And so much of our strength and healing has come because we have connected with someone else who is queer, and we've tried to navigate the world like that. Even if, even in terms of, what to do about this person who's being discriminatory towards you, is something you discuss with someone else, perhaps, who's experienced the same level of discrimination. So I do feel that a lot of, I do feel that in terms of addressing these experiences, one is, of course, I hope that there is some form of affirmative mental health support this person has. And the second, I hope, is there is community connections. And again, what to do or what is the next step will come once, this person feels stronger to deal with it, because again, homosexuality is not going anywhere, and unless we start working, even homophobia is here to stay. So we will have to figure out what to do, but I really hope that whoever has asked this question has some sort of supportive environment of peers, community, and if possible, some sort of therapeutic help as well.
Okay, there's another question. Any one of you can take it up. Of course, there's as a mental health professional and an ally trying to hold safe spaces in corporate, also as support groups, what are some things we could keep in mind, given that there could be homophobic people who might cause harm to my clients or their profession. So they're probably checking in terms of, how can I ensure that if a person is homophobic, probably educate them, and even education is a lot that is coming in another area. How do we, as an ally, how do I educate people around me?
I think firstly that as an organization, if you're an organization setup, there should not be any space for homophobia. Firstly, I feel that. Then there's no point of talking about policies and processes. You have to hold the bullet by its gun, right? Like for example, I remember one of my senior leaders saying this. You may, and I think this is a very strong statement I think she made in front of the senior leader. She said that you may, I don't know, I don't care if you must be hitting your wives or your daughters at home, but when you enter this organization, you need to respect women. You need to treat them equally. You may have certain ideas and thoughts outside this work environment, but once you enter the organization, you need to follow and abide by the policies or the processes that are there. And that is where you create a clear demarcation that you may have certain faith, you may have certain beliefs outside this organization. But once you enter this organization, there is a certain code of conduct that we follow. And that needs to be a clear, driven approach. You cannot have space for homophobia. That means you are encouraging that culture, and it's okay to, and you're making it sound as if it's okay to have homophobia or, bullying that can happen to anyone. I think you need to put your step down and say, sorry, this is not something I expect anyone in this organization to act or deal in certain way. I think that should be very, very clear. You don't have to put up with nonsense, I feel at least. That's how I would bluntly put it.
Thank you, Malin. Thank you for taking that up. Also another common, and I see that in the question as well. How do I tell people that I'm an ally when I don't know who is part of the community out there? Anybody wants to take that up?
You can put a small little pride flag at your desk. That could work. Just a small one. And it should not, there was once this small activity that we were doing, and the company wanted to write the word ally on the card and give it, because otherwise what if it reads as I am gay? But you see the problem in that, right? So don't write anything on it. Just have a tiny little pride flag at your desk. I think that's a good signal to anyone who's looking for, someone at workplace to talk to.
Thanks, June, because I did read a couple of studies as well, which showed that even though I want to be an ally, and that, it probably plays in the mind saying that I don't want people to mistake me to be part of the community, which itself is bad. But that is stopping people from, so the lack of awareness, so many aspects that go by in terms of, it plays at the workplace. So we are really, really far away from true inclusion and creating belonging. So
absolutely, yeah.
That is the problem I find with that statement, right? Like, I want to be ally, but I don't want people to mistake me for being gay, lesbian, transgender.
Yeah.
I mean, the thought process is so, I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything to say beyond that, but I think if you are an ally, if you are clear and if you are hetero, I don't think so. If the world thinks that you're gay or lesbian or transgender or hetero, should not matter to you. That itself need to be a strong ally. You don't have to put any badge. I remember we used to get badges in our organization too as an ally. A lot of people wore it because it looked fancy. I mean, that is the problem also. I think the bottom line is if you stand up, if you speak up, if you are able to talk, if you show that in your behavior, anybody will come to you and confide to you. Your behavior will speak volumes about it. You don't have to do anything beyond, at least in my mind, right? To show that, I am a strong ally, and you don't have to push people to come out, like June said earlier, right? You cannot push people to come out. It is as per their own will and their comfort zone. If they find comfortable to come out to you, they will. And I think that's how it should be. Don't push the agenda too much.
Thank you, Melanie. I think we can take probably one last question in terms of saying we are aware, privileged enough with the help of social media and peers to be aware of LGBTQ plus, challenges and of course inclusion. How do we raise awareness amongst probably the underprivileged sector as well as in remote areas? Because our participants are from, diverse areas. So that's a valid question.
Yeah, so I would like to say there are many organizations like Solidarity Foundation that work at the grassroots level. Navita, please feel free to share my email address with the participants as well. And also, we will be able to connect you with different other organizations in different parts of the country who are doing similar work at the grassroots level. So it will be great to get in touch with any of the social work sector organizations. They'll be able to connect you further.
I also just wanted to add to that, to say that I think we do know that life is perhaps in some ways harder if the queer person is living in a small town or a village, because the community, just everyone knows each other. So a lot of us just flee to Bombay, Bangalore and all in order to sort of live our lives away from that kind of scrutiny. So I do understand that life is harder in certain contexts. But also, we maybe not, let's not have the assumption that it might be harder with, maybe those who are not as privileged, or that those who are in the village and all of that, because I mean, in our work as well, where we're talking, we're doing things like sensitization, awareness, what have you. As I said, if the sentiment, if the values are communicated, then actually what might feel alien is only the language. Which is why I was also earlier saying that we don't need to be fixated on teaching L for this and T for this, and because that's also in English. And then we tend to get very, very fixated and just, in some ways waste our energies on the technicalities of it. Yeah. But are we able to communicate? I don't think we need to struggle to communicate messages of equality, messages of solidarity, messages of love. Those can be done with any constituency, irrespective of language and urban-rural divide, technological divide, etc. So it's absolutely possible. I think just to reiterate that the work has to begin with self. I'm sure there is a lot that even people like June and Melvin are doing in terms of procedures and processes. But for things to really change, if we do not work on, our own, even to be an ally, if the ally cannot work on their own shame, their own discomfort, if all of us are not able to do that work with ourselves, because gender sexuality is not out there, it is within each of us. And if we are not able to work with ourselves, then those measures will not really will not lead to change at the end of the day. So just wanted to sort of underline that point.
Thank you, Pooja. Very rightly said. It is about that, and there are no boundaries. There are no in only certain areas, because even from the underprivileged, families can be very accepting for who you are and love you for who you are, and that's the bottom line, right? As a closing note, Melvin, anything that you want to share?
I think I just want to leave with one last statement. I think I'll go with the earlier statement I said. You may hate the idea, but you can't hate the person. I feel sad that people have to give their life. The two articles that I read on today, I think before coming for the session, I think parents are trying conversion therapy for their kids. People have to give their life for being who they are. They commit suicide. I feel sad and sorry. As a society we fail, and I think if each of us understand that, you may not understand the community or what it stands for, but you can't hate the person. I think that is the bottom. And I think that's essential.
Thank you, Melvin. June, on a closing note.
On a closing note, I just want to say thank you to all of you for wanting to be a part of this conversation. That's the first step. And as Pooja said, the work has to start within. There can be so many inclusive steps that you can take on the outside and do everything right by the book and do all the things on the checklist. But end of the day, if you are not able to deal with your unconscious fear and shame of accepting other identities other than you, it is not going to be, like Pooja said, homophobia and homosexuality both are going to stay there. So my one and only strongest message once again is, please educate yourselves as much as possible, get the right resources. There is a penny a dozen resources available, and a lot of well-meaning people who are willing to spend their time and resources on this. So please, please go out there and, educate yourselves, and all the younger people in your family as well, if not the older ones.
Thank you, June. Thank you
Thank you.
everyone for joining us today. We hope you were able to get a good takeaway from this session, and we'll see you next month in our next month open session. Thank you so much, panel members. It was really, really nice, talking to you all.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Navita. You were an excellent host. Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Pooja.
much. Thanks a lot.